Everybody for making it out this afternoon. My name is Kraig Kinchen, and I co-chair the committee at Citizen 7 on personal growth and education. And so quarterly, we complement the other programming for Citizen 7 by talking about an issue that might be important or interesting in the community and think about what actions we might take as a result of those conversations. And so tonight we have a real treat. We have two people to talk about a topic that I think is very important, which is how do we engage with one another in a manner that promotes understanding and civil discourse. So Chris Lowery, former commissioner of the Commission for Higher Education in Indiana, and Scott Fadness, the mayor of Fishers, are our panelists. And Marlon Webb is going to be our moderator. So without further ado, I'll hand this over.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, thanks for being here. So expect to hear very little from me. I want you to really hear from Chris and Mayor Fadness up here. So I'll say a little levity here. So I had a conversation with Kraig about this topic a few months ago, and we ended up connecting with Chris, and we talked a little bit more about it. I know they were having some other conversation with Mayor Fadness and his team. I was fairly, elated about this topic, just given where we are in society today and the projects that we work on and things of that nature. And so, where I've been full-time government consulting, working with cities and towns on economic development initiatives across the state of Indiana. And so, this topic was definitely something that I felt was very timely, something that we definitely needed in what we see today. But time had passed, and hadn't thought much about the event other than I'm just going to show up. Get an email from Kraig last night and said, "Hey, Marlon, are you good with the questions for tomorrow?" So now I'm up here. So that's why I say expect to hear very little from me. This is the most you'll probably hear. So I want to turn it over to Mayor Fadness and Chris just to introduce yourselves a little bit more. I know Kraig gave a brief introduction, but just to introduce yourselves and then explain to the audience why this topic is important for you.
Well, thanks, Marlon. My name is Scott Fadness. I am the mayor in the city of Fishers. I'm kind of an unusual mayor in the sense that I'm the first and only mayor the city of Fishers has ever had. I've been in that role for over a decade, and I think Fishers has become synonymous with change over the last 20 to 30 years. If you go back, Fishers was a population of 2,500 in 1985. Today it's 110,000. And you don't experience that kind of change without dealing with lots of different opinions and perspectives, and I think I've kind of sharpened my skill set over the years in dealing with controversy, challenge, adversity, and so I'm really excited tonight to share maybe some thoughts and insights about what it means to lead through change and lead during a time of turmoil.
Okay, here we go. First of all, thank you to Citizen 7 for sponsoring this. It's just a wonderful group of folks who do this. Marlon, thanks for doing this too. I didn't know this when we had lunch a week or two ago either, so I might have told you, or maybe not. And Mayor, it's great to be on the panel here with you tonight. My last role, I think it was mentioned earlier by Kraig, I was Commissioner for Higher Education here in Indiana, overseeing the public education schools in our state, the 7, helping with strategy, the budget, and those types of things. It constitutes by about 10% of the budget in Indiana every year of your tax dollars. So we were trying to spend those wisely. And then before then, developed and then led workforce for Ivy Tech Community College, and then have a history and industry also with publicly traded Hillenbrand, was publicly traded Hillenbrand down in Batesville. As my 92-year-old mother would say, he's still trying to figure out what he wants to do when he grows up. But my interest in being here is that the frame of our civil society, the fabric of our civil society has been a concern of mine for a long time. Some of you have been friends for many years, and others perhaps new, and I don't think that's a surprise to especially some of you. And I also try to live by the motto that I don't get the right to complain unless I'm actually trying to do something about it. So in my mostly semi-retired phase of life, I'm trying to engage on this topic, help lift up better ways to think about our civil society, to just try to be more civil, and frankly, get a whole lot more done when we do that. So thanks for showing up. It's just gracious of you to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
So clearly these two have a background where there's a ton of disagreement, and we know that regardless of what we do, I'm going to get everyone to agree with us. But let's take it back, maybe to something personal, could be professional. Who taught you both how to disagree while still respecting that individual?
Well, I think it would have to be my parents. My parents were hardworking people. My mom was a social worker and a Democrat, and my dad was a farmer and a conservative. And politics just wasn't relevant in our home, but the dignity of every individual was. And so there was a humility that they taught me about connecting with individuals on a personal level and treating everyone with dignity and respect. And then from there, you can eventually talk about perhaps some differences. I think we've got that order mixed up today, but it was definitely grounded in my family values, I think, at an early age.
Yeah, I would lean first on my family. My father, who's been deceased now 8 years, I've shared this with other folks. I was never spanked as a child, never yelled at as a child, didn't have curfew. Probably should have at times. But there were expectations that he set, and then he also just led by example. Truly, purely kind. I think he's probably the person who also taught me the difference between the words kind and nice, right? That there were times that he wasn't necessarily nice, but he was absolutely kind because he loved me to pieces, and my sisters also. But then also other folks along the way who just greatly influenced me. I was thinking of some of those folks today. My first job out of undergrad was to go work on Capitol Hill for about a year for Dan Quayle. And part of what attracted me to go work for him was, now get this is a crazy notion, right? He, considered probably the most conservative senator at the time in the US Senate, had authored a landmark piece of legislation, then known as the Job Training Partnership Act, which also spurred my interest in workforce for so many years. And he did so with a fellow who was at one time known as the Lion of the Senate, far left, Ted Kennedy. I was amazed by that. And, if you know Dan Quayle, he is that way. That is just him. And then the other person in the next role that I was able to have to led by example, and I know some of you knew Bob O'Rourke. I worked for him 3.5 years, something like that. I heard him raise his voice one time. And I also watched him, to a very young, probably arrogant staffer, take time to teach and explain a lot of things that were just really heartfelt and very thoughtful on his part.
That's awesome. So, Mayor, you touched on this a little bit already, but curious if you can expound on it just a little bit, especially as you talked about how when you approach a conversation with individuals, obviously seeing them as the individual versus whatever the issue is that you're engaging in. But just to dive in a little bit more on that, especially as we look at principles guiding what we do. So what principles would you say guide you as you engage with individuals that you disagree with?
First would be humility. And I come from a place of not judgment, but try to gain understanding. I think there's not enough humility in elected office today on any level. I'll tell you this one quick anecdotal story that really was informative for me. I had this woman who was very upset almost every month. She would show up at a school board meeting, protesting things, yelling, very passionate about a variety of cultural issues, social issues. And she would always hit me up on emails and social media. I never met this woman before in my life. And so I decided to reach out to her and say, can we just grab a cup of coffee or a Diet Coke? And so we met, and when we first sat down, this woman immediately just started hammering me about political and policy issues, just like right out of the bat when we sat down. And I finally just said, hey, I'm Scott. I have three kids. My wife, she works. These are the kinds of things that I do. Can you tell me a little, like, who are you? And it was almost like a physical, like someone had hit her across the side of the head. She didn't know how to process that question. And then we spent the next 45 minutes learning about her family and the challenges that she's gone through and the struggles that she has. And you realize that behind a lot of this anxiety and anger and challenges that people have, there's something much deeper. And if you approach them as a person, and if you ask them the right questions and you allow them to take you where they really truly want to go, it's amazing the conversation you can have. And we never went back to politics or policy. We just talked as individuals. And I think we need to do more of that. And then I would just say finally, as a principal, I think leadership in public office is about bringing calm to chaos, not bringing chaos to calm. And so the discipline you have to have is when there's change or anxiety, which is all around us today and happening more and more often, your job is to stand in the middle of that and absorb as much of that on behalf of people as you can and redirect it towards something positive. And that's difficult to do sometimes. It's difficult to stand in that noise and realize that your job is not to add to it, but rather to be the calm. And so I always try to remember that when I'm going into intense situations. And never, at least to my knowledge, you would never have seen a social media post from me, a press release, a public statement that would be out attacking someone. Instead, it's talking about ideas and then redirecting people towards what I think could be a constructive path forward for our community, and then frankly, just reassuring them that things are going to be okay.
No, that's awesome. I mean, so with that resident of yours, has she emailed again
No.
or on anything?
That's the thing. I've had that multiple times over the years when I just sit down with them and they find out that I'm not Satan. That I'm a normal human being, that we might disagree on things, but they realize I'm genuinely a good person who wants to do well by them, even though we may disagree on a particular policy. Most people just want to know that their leaders have their best intentions in mind, but they maybe disagree on how you get there. And so it's been interesting to have those dialogues with people that have very, very different perspectives than I do.
That's awesome. Chris?
Yeah, I really appreciate that Mayor starting with humility. That's it's a trait that maybe is in not great enough supply these days. And unfortunately, and I'm glad you mentioned social media. I think social media is just a horrid example of the lack thereof. But that's a topic for another night, right? I too don't put anything out on social media that's negative. My wife would say, by the way, I almost never look at any comments. A couple of people in this room are smiling, doing this about me. I just don't look at comments. So sorry if you make comments on something. I don't read them. I tend to feel that that's not really the real person. It's just a little space that we can do that. But there are 4 words that I try to think about in civil discourse, but also try to have as a guide in what I do. I would also quickly admit that I fumble the ball on these all the time. And we actually set a culture at the Commission for Higher Education around these words. We came to them together. I might admit that I kind of pushed some in to really get them emphasized that they're honor, trust, grace, and gratitude. And I wish he was here tonight. Our good friend, probably many of you, Doug Wilson. I learned from Doug Wilson what honor means. It means to honor every person you come in contact with. It's the supplier, it's the customer, it's your boss, whomever that is. Trust. It's a rock that I've had for 25 years. Somebody gave to me, and it still sits on my desk at home. That, it's my job to earn trust every day, and I should enter a conversation, a relationship, just assuming I can trust you. Grace and gratitude. I'll give a high sign to Dan Elsner. Again, probably a friend of many in this room. He and I get together periodically, and we were having lunch one day at his office and talking about how you start your day. And I said, well, Dan, I'm a nerd. I read these things, and I do my yoga, and this and that and the other. I said, so how do you start your day? He didn't skip a beat. And he said, oh, with grace and gratitude. Wow. Right? And his point, I never really tried to paraphrase for him, but I will tonight. And to extend grace to everybody. And he and I had a faith-oriented conversation around that. My faith says I get abundant grace. And, at the very least, I can extend it. And gratitude is just so easy. It doesn't matter how much money I've got in my pocket, I can extend gratitude when it's heartfelt and meant, hopefully generously.
Yeah, these are great principles. Obviously, they're rooted in faith, rooted in scripture. And it's something that I feel like we all would like to take away and feel like we can just do. Like, we can wrap this up, leave. We got it. This is how we can go about it. But let's be honest, it's harder to do in practice. And so what helps guide you all and to keep these principles in mind as you're engaging in these difficult conversations with individuals?
Well, you surround yourself with people that keep you grounded in the right things, whether that's your faith, go to church on Sunday, you listen to the sermons, and time and time again when I'm sitting there listening to them, it's reflecting the type of leadership that I aspire to, which is counter to the culture today. The culture today is very performative in leadership. It's a different model of leadership than what you hear in the stories in the gospel and things of that nature. And then honestly, I will tell you, my wife keeps me very grounded. One of the great things about my wife is she really does not care at all about my job. Doesn't take any interest in me getting mayor of Fishers. What she cares about is, am I a good dad? Am I a good husband? And I happen to have a job that's a little bit different, but that just doesn't come into it. And so what's really grounding for me is you can get all wrapped up in this political nonsense and this noise of political life, but when I go home, I'm judged on a very different metric, and that immediately, the minute I walk in the door, I realize that's just a job I do, and it helps put things in perspective. And my kids are the same way. They're not impressed by my job. They want you to be a good dad. And so when you surround yourself with all these people, I think it just really grounds you in the humility that's necessary to go back out there and, take it up the chin from people left and right, and then have enough confidence still to go do the things that you believe are the right things for the people that you're serving.
Yeah, I subscribe to a sort of a theory. Arthur Brooks, who talked about this in one of his books, I believe a lot of things are actually complex and not complicated. For me, I discern those two words differently. Complicated tends to be that there's a formula to go figure this thing out. And I think really most of the big issues we tackle, even some of the small issues, are actually complex. There's not just a simple mathematic formula, and that's coming from a guy who loves math. I try to address topics in conversation with that eye toward it, and that in complex situations, the data, sorry Aaron, may not exactly tell us what to go do, but they can inform us, right? And I loved an example the mayor gave of the woman who was kind of yelling from the rafters at everything that was taking place. And I was reminded of a situation right after I became commissioner 4.5 years ago. We had a pretty aggressive agenda we were taking to the state legislature and the governor, and knock on wood, it turned out pretty well because of help from a lot of friends who helped make it happen. And sort of knew what was going to happen during my first hearing in the Senate Appropriations Committee. A lot of friends in that. I'm old, so we've been friends for a long time. And but I knew one senator was really tough, and she did not spare me that day. I was grilled on, mom, apple pie, and Chevrolet, right? I'm just telling you, what I was presenting and talking about, y'all would love every bit of it, I swear to you. But she took me to task, and she was not friendly about it. She was very professional, she was very smart, and so forth. And I was a little like this walking back to the office, and quite honestly, some of the staff was even more so that way. I would just say directly offended. And some of them wanted to talk about it. I said, why don't we talk about that tomorrow? And we did. And I sort of let people voice their thoughts. And they said, so what do you think? What should we do? Should we send something to all the appropriation members? And should we, put something out, et cetera, et cetera? And I said, no, I think what we ought to do is I should probably just call her after we're done talking here. Oh, okay. And there was so much like what you said. She is smart. And I'm telling you, she cares about her constituents. She cares about the students. We just have different styles and so forth. Somebody here may have been in that room when we had that meeting. I can't recall for sure. And, we're like a minute and a half into it. And she said, I won't say her name. She said, if you'll call me her first name, would you just call me by my first name? And I said, yeah, we'll just call me Chris. Yeah, it was, but then I found out a lot too along the way, her family, what makes her tick, why she cares, why she's concerned. But it was so easy just to want to throw a punch. And that would have been silly, and we actually got a lot more accomplished by not doing that.
That's good. So what you all just shared, I know some people can look at that as being passive. But we know that there is much more strength in restraint. And so if we were to look at any of the examples that you gave, or if you have any additional examples, please feel free to share. But how do you find the balance in not being passive while trying to, competently talk to your constituents or whoever it is you're talking to, and you're disagreeing? And it could be on an issue with a vulnerable population or something that involves injustice, whatever it may be. Like, how do you practice that balance?
Well, I don't think I've ever been accused of being passive. I think political courage should be redefined in today's world. I wish it was redefined in today's world, where to me, political courage is standing amongst the chaos and leading poor people towards an outcome and having a clear vision of where you want to go, and not being swayed by the noise around you. Like, to me, that's true political courage. The ability for me to stand in a room and argue with someone effectively and yell back, if that's the definition of aggressiveness or political courage, then color me a coward. Because that's just it's not effective. Like, what I think matters is, are you driving to an outcome that's good for the people that you're serving? And can you do it in a way that preserves dignity for each individual, and you gain a degree of respect from people for having that political courage? I think at the local level, I still see that. I don't know that I see that as you go up the levels of government as much. But I don't really, if people want to accuse me of being afraid of an argument because I'm not willing to engage in that moment in that unproductive way, then so be it. But if you look at, am I committed to the outcome, and am I going to drive relentlessly to a goal? Absolutely.
So ditto on all of that. And I think it does matter how we approach this conversation. I've got a lot of notions about life, so I'm sharing a few of them today. We are swamped with information, and that is not knowledge. that there's a real distinction there, I think. And I think we see that especially, I'll pick on social media again. It's easy to just get some information, a data point, sometimes it's not even right, but some single bit of information does not make me more knowledgeable. It makes me know a single point of information. And Fred's in this room. We had a bit of a conversation at a United Way board retreat this morning, and that topic came up in a couple of table settings, and talking about the mission and so forth. And it's real easy to get sidetracked by those bits of information, which then make us want to go like this, which then somebody will say, yeah, but he's strong. Did you see him stand up to that? I'm like the mayor, I don't have time for that. But if somebody wants to dig into it and really understand the topic, let's do it. Yeah, let's understand why, as an example, we had a decline in college going for 10 years in this state. It wasn't one data point. It was complex. Imagine that. And then having a strategy around that. And I want us to talk at some point here about how we greet people into the room and at the table, because all of those voices can really, really matter when you're trying to do something big, like change a trajectory of something like the college going rate, or see that more kids are eligible for something like the 21st Century Scholars Program in Indiana, which they are now. Right, but it takes that clarity and the knowledge around what we're talking about, with a clear strategy, but also having other people at the table. And I know we're going to get around to that, Marlon. I think that's really a critical topic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll ask one more question, and I'll open it up for the audience. That's okay?
Yeah, and we'll have some group discussion talk. So probably can only handle maybe one or two questions.
Okay. So, Chris, something you just said, and it's coming to get to the why. Like, why is it important that we engage with individuals that we don't agree with?
Wow, I'm going to try to make 3 points pretty succinctly here. And again, apologies to those of you who heard this before. I have never been the smartest person in the room, and I'm the least interesting person I know. I am 64 years old. I am so bored of me. Each one of you is just abundantly more interesting than me. I mean, I know that. I shook hands. I talked with at least half or 2/3 of you. You're fascinating to me. Let's have coffee. And I also try to go into it. There was a conversation I listened to recently. I think I sent it to a few of you in this room. Brookings Institution had back in June, a conversation with a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent U.S. Senator. It was wonderful. And as you might tell, it was timed right before the 4th of July. Love it. And one of the senators, they were talking about civil discourse and so forth, and I thought, gosh, man, you nailed it. The Constitution starts with we. Maybe you'd memorize the rest. I haven't. But it starts with we. I think that's so compelling. And then I did a little reading on that, and who else has talked about we and so forth in our history. And so tying a couple of those things together, it's just much more fascinating to me, selfishly, to have more people in the room and at the table. So I alluded to this aggressive agenda that we did with a smile on our faces, and hopefully well informed, at the commission and on behalf of higher ed and students in the state. And one of the things that we did was we pulled together, and some of this room were part of that. We pulled together something we began calling the Partnership Pentagon. And part of it was to get other people in the room and at the table, people from business, education, government, nonprofits, and philanthropy, because each one of those folks who represent that brings something different to the table. Pastor Webster and I might have had some experience around thinking about that during the pandemic and trying some crazy ideas that worked because we had people from those 5 areas in the room and at the table. And what we found is not everybody we invited into the room and at the table had always been at the table. And it was remarkable the kind of impact. This one piece of legislation to which I referred, it literally became a joke to me. It was the commission's high priority for expanding the 21st Century Scholarship Program, making sure every kid signed up because they're eligible, right? And by about mid-session, people in the hallways were coming up to me and going, so this thing with the 21st Century Scholars, I hear that's the Chamber's bill. And I'm like, yep, you're right. Chris, I hear this is the Indiana Latino Institute's bill. And I'm like, yes, it is. So you talk to Marlene, right? You get the point. I hear this is fill in the blanks bill. That's right. It's the Urban League's bill. Yeah. One, it's just much more interesting. Two, you can be abundantly more successful. And, if nothing else, we celebrated the 250 of the Declaration this year. That's cool. I really like that. I hope we all celebrate in 2037 the 250 of the Constitution because of the words that puts into force. And I really do believe we start with we, and we'll really start to address a lot of the fraying we see of our civil society, civil discourse, and it ought to be a guidepost to us.
Well, simply put, we had a flood the last couple of weeks, and we had our entire emergency management team together, police, fire, everyone. We thought we knocked it out of the park. As the chief said, we take care of everything, public works. Yeah, absolutely, everything's squared away, great plan, blah, blah, blah. So then Monday, I went out to talk to residents just to go see how they were doing. 50 homes destroyed, and so I'm walking through there, and I'm so confident in our team's ability to address people's issues. I thought, okay, this is going to be no big deal. And I get out there, and I'm talking to one elderly couple whose home had been destroyed, and I said, well, is there anything else we could do? Confident that we had already taken care of all their issues. And they said, well, I don't know if anyone's thought of this, but we could really use some porta-johns out here. And I'm like, we spent hours planning for this emergency, thinking through everything, confident that we had everything sorted out. And something as simple as that we had not thought of. But to the people that were having the lived experience, it was very clear to them what they needed to have their problem solved. And once we made connection with the people that had the lived experience, now we can go get the resources, we can be effective. And so I think it's maybe an oversimplified metaphor, but it is an example of when you bring people who have lived experience and insights that I will never have to the table, they can point you to the things that they need so much more quickly than all the academics in the world can, or any of the planners in the city government. And so that was one of those humbling moments.
I mean, as funny as it sounds, I mean, we can definitely all learn from someone. It doesn't matter who it is and what their standing is. Okay, so I'm not going to say much. We probably didn't have time, probably 0 questions, but at least one question from the audience. Yeah. So whoever throws their hand up first, that's where we'll go.
So I love this conversation. Grace, humility, really important. But in my faith, you're called to grace and truth. You talked about we in the Constitution, the second paragraph of the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Could you both talk a little about grace, humility to what end? What's, because in each one of your examples, I mean, I was 100% Chris, it is a fact that college rates are declining, and therefore we have to be called to these things. And some of you may have seen recently President Obama was giving a talk where he pointed to a table, and he made the point that, we can talk about whether you like this table, is it too tall, is it too short, is it the wrong color? But when you start saying, well, that table's a lawnmower, that's a different conversation, And so y'all could talk a little bit about the civil, but the importance of truth and what we're working to with that.
Yeah, look, I think it's critically important, truth, and frankly, at some point, we have to discern where do we disconnect. whether it's over the facts, the truthfulness of the facts. I was delighted to hear the mayor's story about the woman and having coffee, getting to know each other, and well, there you go. Or the state senator to whom I referred. That's great. But there are other people, I'll just be very direct, that at some point, because they're not interested in the fact that that is a table, or they're not interested in doing anything but screaming, at least in my instance, I would disengage. I also mentor a handful of people at any given time, and I would say to them, I would give the same advice, work with the truth, work with the facts, try to find that spot where somebody will work with you. And some people are just going to be obstinate to the point where it's a wasted energy, and frankly, you can be doing something over here or here that is more productive. And my view of that would be, I did not make that choice, actually. That person made the choice, and there we have it.
I think a couple things. One, I think you can still hold true to what you believe in. Like the pastor the church I go to, we were talking about this, where they have these like unified faith alliances, and where you'll have a Muslim and a Hindu and a Christian all there. And in some of those, they try to convince you that you all have the same. And he's like, well, that's not true. Like, I have fundamentally irreconcilable differences in my beliefs than what you have. So let's just set that aside. And can we find commonality in these other things? And I think one of the things, I was on a vacation recently, which is a dangerous place for me because it gives me too much time to think. But I was thinking about where we've lost our way a little bit, I think, is we used to have a shared common value system to some extent in America. And when you said you were an American, it meant something. It represented a set of values. Were we always practicing them in perfect order? No, but it represented something. And I think today we've kind of lost what does it mean to be an American, and do we have a shared set of values in regard to that? Because if we had that, when people in America started acting counter to those values, we could call them out and hold them accountable. But I feel like we've lost our way in regards to what does it mean to be an American? What are those values that embody what this civil government and what our culture is supposed to be? And so, I'm concerned deeply about that, and I think everyone's now identifying with something other than I'm an American first. And until we get that figured out, I'm afraid this faction society that we have is going to be very difficult to overcome.
So that's why we had you two here, to give us some practical tips here. And so we're going to transition. So let's give a round of applause for